Welcome to Peacebuilding Initiatives with José Barzola. Peacebuilding Initiatives are collaborative ways of developing healthy, positive relationships via dialogue, cross-cultural understanding, and exploring ways to shift our own perspective to build compassion and empathy within our communities. Thank you for joining us today. On today's episode, we have uh, Talia Pedersen, who will share her own experience about her passion about how religion can be used as a peace-building tool. And I really do look forward to exploring the intersection of faith, conflict management, and peace building. A little bit about our guest today. Talia is a Canadian peace builder and community leader with a deep connection to Indigenous culture, raised in a large homeschooling family, including four adopted siblings from the Lil'wat Nation. Talia has been involved in numerous service projects, such as fundraising for human trafficking awareness and disaster relief. She served an 18-month mission for her church in Eastern Canada, where she took on leadership roles. Talia graduated from Brigham Young University-Hawaii in Intercultural Peacebuilding and has worked at the Polynesian Cultural Center and the David O. McKay Center for Intercultural Understanding. Currently, she collaborates on peace building projects with the Pono-Pono Peace Initiative, focusing on interfaith dialogue, food security, and sustainable community development. Thank you so much for joining us today and being here with us. Greatly appreciate the opportunity to come together. Um, yeah, I just want to start off with have a couple questions here, and then we'll jump around and we may go off another trail, but this is part of the journey and it's always exciting nonetheless. Um, could you provide just talking a little bit further about, we initially was talking about like religion and peace building and what role does religion play in peace building efforts around the world today, and especially within your life specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think about this question, something that's really interesting is lots of people have different perceptions about religion. And so some people can view it in a positive light and a negative light. So just like anything, it is kind of based on how you use it and how you approach it. But religion is a really powerful tool for peace building. A lot of that is because many religions have so much peace and strong values built into their theology. So, whether that is the values of forgiveness or nonviolence or reconciliation and healing, many religions, worldwide religions, regardless of which sect they are or which main religion they come off of, share these common values. And so it becomes a place where people interact with these religions and are affiliated with the religions, and they have these values instilled upon them, which can be translated to peace building really easily. We know that peace building is a very broad field and it can be used in many different ways, but mostly focuses on, perpetuating and making healthy and positive relationships. And religion really plays a beautiful role in creating positive relationships and helping to heal from things and to move forward and see bright hope and future with peace and within any different relationships around us. So there really is a big intersection between religion and peace building, and you can see this anywhere in the world that you look at. Different nonprofit organizations are often led by religious organizations. Humanitarian efforts are often led by them. Interfaith communities and collaborations. You can just see the wonderful things that happen anywhere in the world, really, that you take time to kind of focus on. And so I've been really blessed by the power of being parts of those projects.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And maybe you can go a little bit further into what are some common misconceptions that people have about religion's role in like conflict, especially when it comes to like violence and peace. Especially as we look historically, sometimes we think of like the Crusades,
Mhm.
which unfortunately, many times it's attributed to religion from one perspective as to why things were done a certain way, or even looking at just the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii with the missionaries. So feel free to jump in with either of those ideas. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of a big one. But this is a common misconception, especially with like the Crusades or the Holy Wars or colonization in general, but specifically the Kingdom of Hawaii as well. And I think the main thing with this is kind of the history of religion. Oftentimes, you've had a country or a state being run by a religious leader, and so then when it comes into like they say a religion is perpetuating or initiating a war or going on this missionary effort or colonization effort. It's often backed up by political reasons or economic or territorial reasons. We're expanding horizons or empires and not the theology of the specific religion. And so that is a very important distinction to make because people do when they don't understand kind of the background of it, just say, you know, the Crusades were a religious pursuit and conquering, and many people were hurt from it, or colonization. But it's not the theology of the religion supporting that. It's more the political aspects and aspirations of the religious leaders of the time. And so for me, that's been a big thing, understanding it as I've studied religion and as a religious person myself, understanding that it's not most religions don't support, like whatever type of religion it is, don't support going and hurting other people. Most religions have much kindness and love and hope and forgiveness within their theology, but sometimes the political aspirations can kind of take over with that. And colonization is definitely one that's close to my heart. With the Kingdom of Hawaii, I also have siblings from Indigenous tribes in Canada, and so understanding that this colonization by Christian missionaries wasn't the Christian church trying to hurt people, but it was missionaries who thought they had a specific motive, and then who kind of were misled and had those political aspirations and those political ideals take over, where they didn't lead with the theology and the values of the religion. So I think that's like the biggest misconception that you can see. But obviously, in any religion, you're going to have extremist groups or an extremist leader who can kind of make a negative perception for that whole group as a whole. We've seen that definitely with like the Israel-Gaza conflict. It's not necessarily the whole religion, but there are extremist groups that kind of take that upon themselves and then get the spotlight on them, where people can develop those misconceptions. So it's about understanding the religions that are in question and understanding their theology, and just doing a little bit more research to be able to see that really the theology of these religions are so beautiful and have so much in common with us.
No, thank you. Thank you for tackling from the very beginning. And I think one of the big things I'm hearing is, unfortunately, this happens with a lot of not just even religion, like even the philosophies of politics. Once you have humans embedded in it, and there's, things like greed and egos that get in the way. The philosophy itself, or even like social structures, whether we think about socialism or communism, it's like in theory, the concept is beautiful, equal society, but unfortunately, yeah,
Yeah.
egos and greed get in the way. Oh, to live in a world where we would put others first.
Yeah, and it's so interesting too, because if you think about like John Galtung, his like violence triangle, and you have like the structural violence and the cultural violence and the systemic violence. Um, Oftentimes these religions will, they'll have an experience like the Crusades, the Holy Wars, or colonization, and then certain behaviors are kind of then cultured in or grandfathered into their systems, and then you have people later on who are had being negatively affected by them, and we have to kind of go back to the roots to understand where did the system come from. It's not part of the theology. So I think it's also a problem, like, with people outside of the religion, but also in the religion. It has to become a reckoning and an understanding of where these systems may have come from, and or the culture of the religion has changed throughout time. And yeah, the power and the greed just kind of get to people sometimes, and that does negatively affect people.
So
um,
what can we do to kind of shift that narrative and create more peaceful interpretation of faith?
I think like the biggest thing that I found, I've done a lot of collaborations between like the three big religions, like Muslims, Jews, and Christians. And I'm a Christian myself. But I think the big thing for me, because I was raised in a very Christian home, surrounded by many Christian people, and then as I have come to university, was kind of able to see different perspectives and have some narratives challenged for myself. It's just, yeah, exposure and the experience. And for a person who wants to be able to kind of understand those misconceptions and get over them, I think they need to seek. They need to look at different, whether even online, you look at different, what is the core beliefs of the Muslim people? What does Islam mean? And like peace and is in their name, and they're so big on forgiveness, and the Jews, and we all originated from Father Abraham. Like there's so many connections, that if you do that research and if you seek, you can understand that we're more connected than we are separated. And even as a person who isn't religious, you can see like so many values that you resonate with. And so I think it really comes with that seeking, that personal kind of exploration. Because if you have a misconception, but you're not willing to challenge it or not willing to talk to people about it, it's never going to change. Just with a stereotype, with any type of group that you're put in or you think about people, you really have to kind of seek to put yourself out a little bit, just to kind of challenge that a little bit and then see what happens. Doesn't mean you have to accept everything the other people say, but challenging those narratives is a really important thing to kind of overcome the misconceptions.
No, thank you. Thank you. Really talking about like curiosity
Mm.
and questioning, which many times in certain religious faiths, there's you shouldn't question. Things are just as they are. So thank you for speaking to that a little bit. What specific qualities or teaching of religious leaders you think can help foster reconciliation in post-conflict societies?
It's a really good question. Um, I think like authenticity is a really big one because something that, as we've discussed, each different religions throughout periods of time have had times where wars or conflict have been associated, especially if you look at the three main world religions. And I think authenticity and transparency from religious leaders, acknowledging what was wrong, and then under like just sharing the theology and sharing where maybe past wrongs were committed and just recommitting people to follow theology and like values that they have in their religion. I think in a world religious leader that is really important because it allows people to be validated for the experiences they've had or the experiences they've learned. Like I didn't get colonized, but I was deeply affected by colonization, especially in Canada where I'm from. It's really big, and then in Hawaii where I received my education, it's so big. You see everywhere the effects of colonization, and I had to really reconcile myself to this terrible thing that happened to these beautiful indigenous people of the Americas and Hawaii. And so being able to have authenticity and transparency in a religious leader, just saying, this is hard and this happened, and then helping people to be able to heal where they are. So other values of like forgiveness, telling people and helping preaching scriptures and relevant religious concepts that help people to forgive and move on, I think is really vital as well, because if we live in the past, we're never going to progress anywhere, and we're going to just keep poisoning ourselves. Someone once told me, when we have like something hard and we don't forgive someone, we're just drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Like we're the one who's suffering, the other person isn't suffering, right? So forgiveness really is the biggest help we could give to ourselves. So I really think those two big things are really important in religious leaders, and help people to develop trust in them to be able to start that journey again of creating a new relationship with religious groups or religious affiliations or just the values and beliefs associated with religion.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking to like sincerity, the humility, the forgiveness, and you're speaking to emotions, and that's sometimes the toughest things to admit, especially for folks in leadership roles, or it kind of goes against that whole, ego and greed that we talked about earlier. They don't go well with emotions, but yeah, it can go really far if you just just an apology. It's a good step forward to begin with. So thank you for that. Um, how how do you believe religious leaders do you think what they can do to bridge divides or have a responsibility to take on a public stand on peace or conflict? I know sometimes they tend to remain neutral. Just
Mm.
any thoughts on?
Yeah. That's an interesting one because different religions have different stands or perceptions on different conflicts. I do think that religious leaders have a lot of sway with their religious followers, obviously, whether that is the Pope or the different imams or the prophets within different religions. They have a lot of people looking up to them. And so I personally do think it's important that when something occurs that is against their religious values, that they do speak up about it. Um, but I think that that can be done in a way that speaks up against excuse me, the violation of the human right or the violation of the value versus the political aspect of things. You take the Israel-Gaza conflict, for instance. I believe, and in my religion, life is the highest sanctity, the highest honor. And so our religious leaders have told us to respect that life, and on both sides, lives were being lost. So it didn't become a political stand that we affiliated ourselves with, but it became I stand and I support the human right to live, and therefore I condemn this violence, and I will do my part to spread awareness and to help this conflict to come to an end. Because of the human right and the value that is being violated, not because of the politics. And so I think those two things need to be understood because they can very easily be mistaken, and religious leaders can be worried about that. But if they take it as an approach where it is the value and the human right that we stand for as a religion and it's being violated on both sides, I think that is a really powerful thing that empowers people and makes people feel heard, doesn't make them feel like you have to be an other. That's a big thing in peace building, is like finding that connection, right? We're all connected, so we don't have to be on opposite sides. And I think when we look at the human right and the values within a conflict and within a war, we can really connect on just the importance of that, the importance of the mothers and the children and the fathers that are being affected, and not let the politics come into play. Did that answer the question?
No, no, thank you. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. And that kind of leads us to talking about interfaith dialogues and just how important is interfaith dialogues and peace building efforts, and how it can be, might you share how it can be facilitated effectively?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really important. It's kind of a different approach to peace building than some people take, but it's one that I'm really passionate about. But I think it's really important because faith, whether or not, like in today's day and age, lots of people don't affiliate themselves as being religious. They're spiritual, but don't affiliate with a specific religion. And that's okay. I respect that. But whether or not we like it, our history of civilization has been very religious up until just a couple hundred years ago, right? And so to understand any of our history, we need to understand these religions, and we need to understand where they're coming from, and how these, even take the United States, how these Christian principles that these people came from Europe to come here to have freedom of religion, how that affects our constitution and our world today, whether or not people are religious. And so I think that interfaith dialogue helps you understand yourself better and helps you understand your country better. As Americans, as cultural indigenous people, the cultural principles and religious people's principles are so intertwined. You take the Hawaiian hula, for instance. It originated as a spiritual religious dance. It's not just a cultural representation, it was a spiritual ritual for them. And so you can't separate them. And so in my perspective, in my opinion, interfaith dialogue just helps you learn so much about yourself, about your people, about your country, about your culture, because those values have been, up until recently, so intertwined. And I think if we dig deep enough, they are. And so this interfaith dialogue can look like so many different things. It can look like just being friends with people from other religions. It can look like I've hosted conferences where different speakers from religions come together and just share their history. That was such an impactful moment when I was able to do that in 2023, help host a conference where we had people from a Muslim group on Oahu and a Jewish group and a Christian group come together, a couple of different sects kind of involved within those groups, but they just talked about their history from Father Abraham. And I didn't know all these connections, and so many of the people there didn't understand that we were all so connected. And it really changed my perspective on religion and all these people that I maybe didn't know a lot about, is that like I actually come from the same places that my religion, my people do. And so I think interfaith connection can look like, friendships. It can look like getting together for dinner for different rituals and different, like Ramadan or different Jewish religions or Christian holidays. You can kind of share those together, or it can be actual events where you have speakers from different religions, or conferences. There's so many different ways you can do it, but just really exposing yourself to other principles and values is, I think, the biggest thing that can change just yourself and help you to understand yourself and your people better.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for speaking to that. And that actually reminds me very much of just in my own knowledge base of Indigenous communities, that there is, the saying that everything is connected, that and not just within those Indigenous that Indigenous community, but within the world. I mean, in so many ways. And I think, thank you for speaking to, if we just take time to really just talk to each other, get to know each other. Yeah, there's a lot of beautiful things that are unique about us and the way our communities are, but we start realizing there's a lot of common ground and things we have in common. And it's, I think, beautiful because it just makes the world a little bit smaller. And even if you are thousands of miles from, the homeland and all that. So thank you. Thank you. And for also providing perspective about, interfaith dialogues are not just like being around in the circle talking to people. It could be an act like hula, or just so many. Yeah, it's, and you talked a little bit about colonization earlier, and just reminds me of, I don't think it was until, yes, I was aware of colonization, but I was not actively thinking about how it is embedded in so many aspects of our everyday life until like I started living in Hawaii and just almost having to like shift my own perspective. It was like, oh wait, am I talking like blood quantums? Am I talking like that because of colonization? Am I looking at something? So having to just kind of like, sometimes we say it's like thinking outside the box, and um, but it's like constantly we're having to like check like, is that accurate, or am I just saying that because I've been conditioned this way,
Mhm.
unfortunately? So yeah, it's just trying to rummage through all the noise
Yeah.
basically that has been created.
Yeah, and I think it's a beautiful like it's kind of a thought process of like, hey, what am I saying? How does it affect the people around me? But I think it's also a beautiful opportunity to be able to give ourselves space to understand the world differently. Because, like you said, we are conditioned based on where we grew up. So, as Canadian, grew up in a Christian home, and that did condition me to see the world in a different way. But each time I go out and I talk to people and experience different things, it broadens my mind. And I think also just speaking to what you were saying before about we're more connected than we think. I think that if we approached relationships and finding, rather than like what's unique and different about me, but what actually connects me to you, I think that that is such a powerful tool for peace. And that's what peace building is all about. Is like what connections do we have so that I can honor your humanity and you can, and I invite you to honor mine as well. Like I'm treating you how I want to be treated, but also because we have so much connected. And so if I demean you or put you down or see you as less than a human, then I also do the same to myself, whether or not I realize it. And so I think that every experience we have, challenging our perceptions, thinking outside the box, that thought process, that thought activity, helps us to be able to see people around us as actual people whose like needs, wants, and fears are just as valuable as my own, and allows me to have tools or approaches or experiences that can show them that I see them. Because it's one thing to just say I see you, but to have the tools in your toolbox and the experience or the values or whatever it is to show them that you see them, that is the power of peace building. And that's just what I love so much about the intersection between religion and peace building is there's just so much that you can connect on, and it makes me so happy.
Thank you. Thank you. Could you discuss a little about any challenges or successes you've encountered in fostering cooperation between different religious traditions for peace building purposes?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think like the biggest one is when people just don't realize they need to be challenged, when they don't realize that they need to kind of go out and attend these events. For instance, if we have an event with different religions coming together, sometimes attendance is hard because people don't understand that that's a need and that that will help them. And so I think sometimes that comes to like how we frame different religious activities needs to be done in a way that relates to people and not is just like we're having a religious conference, like that's going to draw in a different crowd than like we're having a place where we understand more about our culture and our history, different ways like that. But that has definitely been a challenge is we're passionate about it and we have religious leaders who love to speak and to connect with people around the island from different groups, but then having people buy in and attend can be really hard to be able to kind of share these beautiful experiences. So that definitely is hard. Yeah, and just something that you have to be aware of and be very intentional about, so that people can all be respected for their time and their contributions. I think another challenge is just as we are trying to break down stereotypes, you have to be really careful about the things you say, about the way you approach things, so you don't offend people. And so I oftentimes, when I'm interacting with people, I say things and I'm like, I don't know if this is disrespectful. I'm just learning, please help me learn. When I'm addressing a religious leader or when I'm entering a religious space, I'm just like, let me know what's respectful to you. So it takes a lot of humility, but that can be hard too, the translating across the different cultures and religions to make sure everyone is respected and has time for their religious observances how they need them.
No, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, just humility, honesty, a little humor can go a very long way. So thank you for, pointing those out. Might you share a little bit about how can religious institutions collaborate with secular organizations and governments to create a more holistic approach to peace building? Um, I know sometimes we don't see that enough, or maybe it's happening, but we just don't see the bridge, I guess.
Yeah. And that's an interesting one because I think it really depends on the organizations collaborating. But I know, for instance, a lot of religious organizations are really big into humanitarian work. And so that is a very natural cross and place to like collaborate and interact with other organizations within the local communities, whether, like the Red Cross or different medical communities or different shelters to kind of help people who've been displaced or whatever natural disaster or humanitarian aid is needed. So I think that's a really big one that in my religion specifically, they do a lot of humanitarian aid, and so there's a lot of collaboration there. But you have to be careful with those types because you don't want the people to feel like you're collaborating with them to like convert them or to any type of thing. So it has to really be portrayed as like, we have something we would love to help you and no ulterior motives. And oftentimes religious values are brought up kind of in passing and you can connect on those, but not in a way that's like pushy. So I think that's kind of something to be aware of within those different organizations, is just making sure that people are respectful of the purpose of the interaction. But I think there's a lot of space for interaction between secular and religious organizations. It just has to be framed kind of the right way. Yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you. Um, so you kind of touched upon this a little bit with, the Israel Gaza situation, but how can with fundamentalism or extremism, how can there be any risk of quote unquote weaponizing religion for peace building? So how do we avoid it? Like, how do we kind of get through all that noise?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question.
Yeah,
I think that's a hard one. I don't think there's a big solution for it because I think it again depends on the people not wielding, but the people initiating the peace building effort or initiating the interfaith collaboration or the interfaith efforts. And I think it just needs to be done in a mindful way that respects the humanity of all the people involved. That's honest, transparent, and just respects the humanity like that is the number one thing in our peace building program at BYU Hawaii, is just understanding the humanity of the people you're interacting with and showing them that you are there to learn, and you're there to respect that. And so I think that's just the biggest thing anyone can do, especially in such sensitive situations
yeah,
where so many people are hurt and there's so much history between those two groups
right.
of people, like cultural and religious, and just like the state and the way politics things are run. Like there's so much history. I don't even know if there is a solution. But if you have that humanity, if you lead with your heart, like Brene Brown talks about that, leading with authenticity with your heart, then even if things have a risk to be weaponized or have a risk to be misunderstood, like you're really just putting yourself in a place that people can accept you for who they are and can return the same. And so I think I spoke to that earlier too, but really just be careful and just be honest and just be vulnerable and just be there and just to see their humanity and let them feel that, whatever it looks like. And I think that's the most powerful thing that you can really do, even if your project or your organization doesn't take off. If those people can feel seen, they can feel like they were heard and understood, whether it's political or not, or religious or not. I think that does so much to build peace and to plant those seeds of peace that later on can be sprouted and nurtured by different people.
Thank you. In your experience, would you say younger generations are becoming more or less involved in using religion for peace building, and how can we engage them effectively?
That's a great question. I would say, I don't know if I'm the best person to speak to this because my university is a Christian university. So a lot of the people that I interacted with are very involved in interfaith activities. But I think as a whole, our generation is kind of stepping away from religion a little bit. Um, which is hard, but the people that I interact with are very religious, so it's kind of like two different worlds to kind of engage in, you know? But I think that's something I've really enjoyed as a young person engaging in these spaces is just understanding the applicability that religion and like values have, like understanding the power of hope and understanding where my good values and where following these specific standards like and staying away from drugs or alcohol, things like that that harm my life, understanding how much that has helped me and understanding how much a trust in a higher being or a higher person can give you so much peace in your life. Showing just that how relevant it is today, I think can really help young people to know that they don't have to do it, you know, all on their own. We don't have to be all that independent generation. We can look to other sources to find that peace or that guidance. So I think that's something I've seen with my friends that I've interacted with is just when you again framing when you frame it in a way that religion and interaction with other religions help you to understand your own trials and your own experiences and your own history and trauma differently and help you to work through those and heal, then I think it becomes a really attractive thing that pulls in the people that need it. So about I guess the framing of it and the sharing of the power of those interactions is a really powerful tool to engage more people within that generation. And just talking, like as I've talked to my friends or my family members about these experiences I've had, like we've drawn them into these experiences as well. So kind of just sharing those, not in a way to convert anyone or anything, but just you know, it just betters your life and it just broadens your horizons and helps you to have more peace, which really is sought after in this world day and age. So
No, thank you, thank you. I wonder if you could share a little bit more about. I know in the bio we talked about your you're collaborating with the Pono-Pono Peace Initiative, and if you can share a little bit more about the, what exciting work you're doing over there.
yeah, that would be great. Yeah, so the Pono-Pono Peace Initiative is just a local nonprofit on island that strives to empower young peace builders. So we just try to engage. So I guess speaking to the question before, we try to engage the younger generation in peace building and empower them in their ideas. And so this has been we love interfaith dialogue, so this has been a lot of interfaith dialogue working with the Ahmadiyya Muslim community on island, as well as different Jewish communities and Christian communities to bring people into those religious spaces. So last semester we were able to bring students from universities and from local communities over kind of on the North Shore over to a Muslim mosque in Honolulu and to just learn what are the fundamental principles of Islam, and what kind of are these teachings that sometimes are misunderstood and how can we find those common grounds and that connection. So that was a really beautiful experience to be able to bring people into those spaces where you can see their religion from their perspective a little bit more. So that was a big project that we were doing. And then another project that we have going on is just how do we take these ideas that these young peace builders have and empower them and give them resources. So we ran a competition where we gave a cash prize to the winner who has an idea on how to use a peace building principle to build peace. So their idea was around restorative justice and bringing people from, you know, a hurt community together with the people who had hurt them and just talking about it and trying to find alternative outcomes to what happened and alternative ways to heal. And so kind of supporting those different groups of people is what we do at the Pono-Pono Peace Initiative, and just trying to help young people see that peace building isn't hard. It can be really natural and it can be really it's always powerful, but it can be something that you just build into your everyday actions and something that we want them to know that they have resources to associate with that. You know, we want them to know that there's people there who can help them along the way. And so that's kind of what we do.
No, no, thank you. Thank you so much. And for those listening in, it's a Pono, Pono, Peace, Pace.org. And I'll put it in the summary, definitely, so folks can learn more about the wonderful work that you're doing. So thank you for, speaking to some of the good work you're doing and in ways folks can continue to get involved. Um, you've kind of shared a little bit about this, but I just wanted to ask, like, might you share maybe a personal experience or story that highlights how religion has helped mediate or heal conflict?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I think something that I was looking at that question earlier, and I think that something that is really powerful when you look at history. So it's not necessarily a personal experience, but you can see um, different ways that religious leaders have kind of stepped up to par and been able to represent how we can be healing and how we can forgive people. And kind of the obvious one that comes to mind is Desmond Tutu with the apartheid in South Africa and just how he led his book No Future Without Forgiveness. But he just led the restorative justice efforts there and really just taught that forgiveness is there. Like we need to be able to forgive to be able to move forward. He said, if you want peace, you don't talk to your friends, you talk to your enemies. You know, you need to be able to put yourself out of your own perspective into the other one to be able to have that peace and that reconciliation. And studying about this and learning about this as kind of just someone who is starting out on their life and their career has been really powerful to help me to know that in the different situations in my life, these values can help me and can help me to build peace in my career as well as my personal life. So I don't have a specific like conflict, but I have been really inspired by Desmond Tutu and also Martin Luther King Jr. and their work in restorative justice and nonviolence to be able to show that peace building is a powerful tool that can make a difference. And when backed up by religion, it has a lot more conviction than just someone who believes in peace. But I think religion really brings in and ties in the values and the conviction that you need to sometimes get through the really hard times that this peace building work and the peace and conflict and peace and justice space can get you into. And so I felt that and just been really blessed to have that peace and that motivation in the midst of different trials and personal experiences.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for speaking also to ways that regardless of religious background, we can continue to build peace building within our communities. And there's so many different ways. And I think that's one of the things being, I won't call it the field because I think it limits it by calling it a field. By just being in this space that getting folks to shift their own mindset and perspective to see how they too are creating change within their communities or how they can continue to create change in their communities. Because um, I think everyone's doing good work. Sometimes it's just not being acknowledged in the lens of a peace
Yeah.
builder. It's just like, oh, that's my job, or like that's what you just do. You're kind to your neighbor, and that's it. Just giving someone comes over and wants a cup of sugar, I guess. That's basic example, like or these days in age, it's like eggs that are becoming such a limited quantity that you're like, oh, I think I can part with like half a dozen and it becomes like a building block to a relationship nowadays. So yeah, there's so many different ways, you help out your elderly neighbor put their groceries, bring it inside, that kind of stuff. Like, uh, so I think, thank you for speaking to that. I guess I don't know if you want to share what's next for you. I know you finished over at BYU. Are you looking to get further education or get onto the academia side or the world is your ocean kind of thing. But and no pressure if you have no nothing's been planned out just yet, and that's quite okay. And that's part of the journey, I think, and the chapters that have not been written yet.
Yeah, for sure. I've done a lot of planning. Plans come and go. I think I've really learned that, okay, you try and then you learn from those experiences. But currently, the path I am pursuing, we'll see how it goes. But I've applied to a few different grad schools in the international spaces for a religion and conflict master. So that's typically a master's in theology or philosophy, and then underneath it is the specialization in religion and conflict. And so there's a few in the UK, one in the States, and one in the Netherlands that I am looking into. And just as we've talked together, you can see that I really love this space, and I the whole master's programs are about how do you use religion as a peace building tool, and how do you use religion to analyze and understand conflicts. How do we say, okay, if I look at the Israel Gaza, for instance, because this is a very relevant conflict, if I look at this from a religious perspective, like what more do I understand about why this conflict and this land and this space is important to these people? Like what light does it shed on it? Because when you're trying to analyze conflict and resolve conflict, you really need to understand the root issues and the root problems. And so that's what my whole degree would be, is understanding how to use a religious lens in analyzing and understanding conflicts, so that I can go into government spaces or NGO spaces or on the ground grassroots spaces and to just help them to see these conflicts in a different perspective, and then give them tools to then use these religious values and experiences, whether or not they're a religious person. It's part of our history, like we have to acknowledge that. And so how do we use these values and this experience and this history to then build peace and to then build connection and to then break down these barriers that we've put in place to kind of have the root and the pure values and the pureness of the theologies of religion, and use those to build peace, to use those to connect upon. So that really would be the whole focus of my master's program, which I'm so excited about. um, but just to, yeah, empower you with more tools and more understanding and more theories to then bring into these peace building and religious spaces to help make the world a better place, because I think that everyone has goodness to share. But the beauty of peace building is that you're given tools and you're given understanding on how to empower that goodness, how to perpetuate that goodness so that people all around can be more empowered to build peace. Most people are doing it whether or not they realize it, but we can share tools and understandings on how to do it in a more effective way and how to continually do that to just empower this world. So that's kind of what I'm working towards, and I'm really excited and hope that everything works out. An internship would be a part of that program, which is such a valuable experience to be able to work in the field with different organizations in religion and conflict. So yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
You so much. I have to say, I just have to thank you so much for today, for sharing, incredible journey and insights into faith as a powerful tool for peace building. Your dedication to bridging divides, fostering understanding, creating sustainable peace through interfaith dialogue, shifting our perspective of what an interfaith dialogue. It's truly inspiring. So, your story definitely sparks new ideas and reflections on how we can all contribute to building stronger, more compassionate and beloved communities. So thank you so much. And it gives me great joy to just have you in this world. So thank you for being here and doing what you're doing. And as someone who, not gonna like age myself, but definitely a bit older than you. It's good to hear inspiring voices. On the every time I do one of these, gives me hope for a brighter, better future than the one we're in. So thank you for everyone who tuned in. And as you said, peace starts with understanding, and it starts with you, really. So let's definitely keep this conversation going. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.